Hello and welcome back to Round the Table, the slow TV radio podcasts from the meeting point for students of English not only in Bilbao but throughout the world. And in a packed programme today we are discussing the topic of cleanliness, pronounced cleanliness, not cleanliness. We've been discussing personal hygiene. We've also been discussing domestic appliances and how our household chores have changed over the years. We were also discussing the environment, local environment and graffiti and litter and that kind of thing. And I know a phrasal verb joke about picking up litter. But first, let's have a look at some of the phrases from this week's conversations. To drop hints. This is what you have to do if you know somebody or you work with somebody who has a very strong body odour. What do? You drop hints. So you might comment on the price of shower gel, or maybe start a discussion on the benefits of different brands of soap or deodorants. So that is to drop hints. A refreshing change is just a very interesting collocation. It makes a change, you could say, or you can say it makes a refreshing change, because changes are usually refreshing. It drives me mad. It drives me up the wall. It means it makes me mad. This is the verb drive, which existed a long time before cars were invented, don't forget. It means it makes me mad. The last resort, or when all else fails. When you have tried everything else, then the last thing that you try is the last resort. Then we were discussing diseases and the spread of diseases. This can also be used for rumours. It spreads like wildfire. A wildfire is like a fire in a forest. Wildfire. So usually when we have similes, they are with adjectives. Like as white as a sheet or as dead as a dodo. But occasionally we have similes with verbs, and this is one of them. It spreads like wildfire. Here's another one that might be useful. To sweat like a pig. Obviously this came up in conversation because we were discussing hygiene, and some people, especially in August, some people sweat like a pig. And packed in like sardines. This is a passive one. The people were packed in like sardines on a very crowded metro on the way home from work in the summer. Everybody is packed in like sardines and they are sweating like pigs. And I suppose a disease can spread like wildfire in those situations. So those are some interesting phrases from this week's conversations. We've just got a couple of what's the differences. Now two of these I've given you before. Nothing like and nothing to do with, but there's also nothing compared to, which again is slightly different. So the first one, nothing like. Now imagine that you know somebody who is very, very tall with black hair and brown eyes, and he has a brother who is very short with blonde hair and blue eyes. You would say that he is nothing like his brother. There is no similarity whatsoever. Okay, that's nothing like. Nothing compared to. Yes, if you think of the song by Sinead O'Connor or Prince, nothing compared to you. That is to compare two things, but to say that one of them is far superior. So if we were talking musicians, imagine there was a band that recorded a very good song. They released an album and it was fantastic. And then the second album was terrible. You would say the second one was nothing compared to the first one, meaning the first one was far superior. So nothing compared to is also making the comparison, but saying that one of them was much better than the other. Nothing to do with means there is no connection between the two. So the example to remember is the small family shops have closed in Bilbao in recent years. Okay, those little private businesses are not very successful. And at the same time, there is an increase in tourism in Bilbao. But these two things are not actually connected. They just happen at the same time. So the rise in tourism is nothing to do with the closing of these small family businesses. It's got nothing to do with it, which means there is no connection. Another quick, what's the difference? Antisocial behaviour. Antisocial is, we were talking graffiti and people that paint things on the lifts and on the streets and on the windows. That's antisocial. It's against society. Unsociable is just to describe people who don't want to be sociable. They are loners. They like to be on their own and they don't like to go out with other people. They are just unsociable, but they're not antisocial. Antisocial is much more negative towards society. And finally, itch and scratch. Yes, itchy and scratchy, if you know the cartoon. Itch is the feeling that you have on your skin, and scratch is what you do with your fingers to alleviate the feeling. Scratch can also be something negative. You might get scratched by your cat. Okay, so the cat can scratch you with their claws. And the mark they leave on your skin is also a scratch as a noun. You can also scratch your car if you drive too close to a wall or something. So scratch can also be a noun as well. But itch is the feeling that you have on your skin. And now I suppose you're thinking, where's that phrasal verb joke he promised us? I recently got a job as a litter collector. It didn't need any training. I just picked it up as I went along. This, as usual with phrasal verb jokes, is the fact that you can take the components of the phrasal verb in a more literal manner. So the phrasal verb to pick something up is usually to learn something without studying, by accident as it were. So you might say that I spent 2 weeks in Rome, and while I was there I picked up quite a lot of Italian, meaning you learnt it in a casual manner without attending any classes. So this joke obviously has two meanings. You can learn this job in a casual manner without having to be trained, and also you physically pick up rubbish as you go down the street. A long time ago, if you were travelling and you wanted to spend the night in an inn, which is something like a hotel pub, you might want a bed for the night. And if you got a bed for the night, it wasn't guaranteed that you got a bed to yourself. You wouldn't be surprised if somebody else joined you during the night. You might have to share the bed with a complete stranger. Now here's a picture of the Great Bed of Ware, which was in an inn in Hertfordshire, which is north of London. This was built in 1590. And it was 3.3 meters wide. And it says here it could sleep 4 couples and up to 12 people on one occasion. And it was so famous that people would actually travel just to stay in this giant bed. In fact, it's mentioned in a Shakespeare play. In Twelfth Night, apparently, it gets a mention. And you can see this in the Victoria and Albert Museum. So there's a curious thing. Staying in a hotel and sharing a bed with complete strangers. I guess it was a good way to keep warm on a cold winter's night. But I wonder what other little creatures might have been sharing the bed with you. Which brings me on to some research. Mites, lice, fleas, ticks, bedbugs. Mites are tiny, invisible things. You need a microscope to see them, and they're usually harmless. They live in dust and dead skin, so the bed is full of them. You can also have them living on your skin, and they live in dust in your house. They can cause allergies, so they're not maybe completely harmless, but they don't eat you. They only eat your dead skin. Lice are the ones that often live in your hair. Head lice are a problem with small children, not so much with adults. I think they don't like testosterone, so children often come home from school and pass them to their mother, but rarely to their father. You can also get lice that live in clothing as well. Maybe not so much anymore, but in the past there were lice that lived in your clothes. Fleas are the ones that suck your blood and jump very high. And they jump off of your dog and bite you and leave little red marks on your ankles. Ticks are other things that only go on you and they stick to you and they suck your blood. These are the ones that usually live on animals in the wild, like sheep and goats and deer and things like that have ticks. Sometimes if you're out walking in the mountains, you might pick up a tick. They sit on the long grass and wait for you to go past, and they detect the heat and they jump on and they sort of swell up with your blood and then they drop off again. They can pass on some dangerous diseases. And bed bugs are the ones that live in the bed and in small cracks and crevices. They don't live on you, they just come out at night to feed on you. They like your blood. Which brings us on to some amazing facts. Well, it's not amazing, but it is quite interesting. In fact, it's a little bit disgusting. I learnt that the average pillow on your bed can double its weight in 10 years. Much of the extra weight, it says here, comes from dead skin cells, dust mites, and their waste. That is quite disgusting. And even more disgusting might be that a kitchen sponge, so the thing that you use to do the washing up, can contain millions of bacteria. The bacterial density in a sponge can be similar to what scientists find in human stool samples. Stool samples, if you remember, looking back at page 38, where I put a whole load of other ways of discussing shit, let's say. The scientific word is a stool sample that you give to the doctor. There's more bacteria on the sponge in your kitchen than in a stool sample. That is quite disgusting. And another interesting fact is that gorillas don't have fleas. You would think that they had fleas, but they don't. Most animals have fleas, well, at least mammals have fleas. They have distinct species. So dogs have dog fleas, cats have cat fleas, rats have rat fleas, and they're very particular to their animal. They don't cross over. So if you have a dog and it's got fleas, those fleas do jump off the dog and they go onto you and they bite you, but then they go, "Ugh, I don't like human blood," and they jump off again looking for another dog. So they're quite specific. So gorillas don't have them. Apart from the fact that they do a lot of grooming, which is a word we'll be looking at again shortly, it's also because they make a new bed every night, and fleas apparently leave the eggs in the bedding. So they don't spend their whole life on the host, as it's called, that they suck the blood of. So you need a nest. So dog fleas will leave the eggs in the nest, and then when they grow into fleas again, they'll jump onto the dog. But as the gorilla moves every night, they're constantly moving, and every night they make a new nest. So consequently, they break that cycle. So gorillas don't have fleas. There's an interesting fact. I've got a couple more interesting facts here. There is no real word for a toilet. All the words we use are euphemisms, because the word toilet itself comes from the French, which refers to a small cloth. A towel, a toilette, is a small piece of cloth. We also call it a lavatory, which, if you think about it, is a place where you go to wash. Along with the bathroom is the room where the bath is. Or even worse, the rest room, as they say in America, the room that you go to rest in. And of course there's the WC, which is the water closet. The closet, like cabinet, sometimes referred to small rooms as well as cupboards. So there's no real word that just means toilet. They all mean other things to refer to the toilet place. And finally, soap. The oldest soap that they found is 4,800 years old. In ancient Babylon they had soap made of animal fat and wood ash. Now, why would you think of mixing ash with animal fat and rubbing it on your skin to make you clean? It seems a strange thing to do, but somebody did it and it made them cleaner. How that works, I have no idea. Now let's look at an interesting word. Groom is an interesting word. Originally, it just meant young man in Old English. It was just a young man. That does survive today in the groom at the wedding or the bridegroom. All it means is the young man that's getting married. From the more general use of it meaning young man, it then became sort of a servant boy, somebody who worked for you would be a groom. And then it became more specific to the one working in the stables with the horses, what we might today call a stable lad. They were called grooms. And then, as they spent a lot of time working with the horses and brushing the horses, and horses have long tails and manes that need tending, they spent a long time brushing horses. So that became the verb to groom, meaning to brush and clean. And this is why we have the more modern context of grooming. As I said, those gorillas spend a lot of time grooming each other. And we talk about grooming products used for shaving and for cleaning your hair and for keeping your skin moist and that kind of thing. They're called grooming products. So it all goes back to the concept of a young boy doing this kind of work. And I can't finish the topic of groom without mentioning a particularly unpleasant job from history. The groom of the stool. Yes, that stool again. The groom of the stool was a highly coveted job back in the 16th century. and for some time afterwards it doesn't exist in the present day. But the groom of the stool, his job was to attend the king when the king went to the toilet. And you had to, let's say, clean the king after he'd done his business. So yes, not a pleasant job, especially if you think about Henry VIII. But like I say, it was a very coveted job because it was a job that would only be given to the most trusted citizen, and it was usually someone very high up in society. And for them, they got to have a few minutes each day, or however long it took, having a one-to-one conversation with the king. And if you imagine in those days, the king would be constantly surrounded by courtiers, and to have the king's ear for so much time every day meant that you could have a lot of influence in society and probably get a lot of business done, if you know what I mean. So the groom of the stool sounds quite disgusting, but it was quite a prestigious post to have in those days. And now it's time for your favourite part of the programme. Here he is, all the way from sunny California, with his monologue on cleanliness. It's Celebrity Guest Speaker.
Cleanliness has changed greatly over the past century. Today, most people shower every day, and the idea of a weekly bath night sounds strange to younger generations. Daily washing helps us feel fresh and confident, but some people wonder whether it is possible to shower too often. Frequent washing can sometimes dry the skin or remove natural oils. Even so, modern habits show how much importance we now place on personal hygiene and comfort. Most people agree that bad breath or strong body odor can be unpleasant, but it is often difficult to tell someone about the problem. Many people prefer to stay silent rather than risk embarrassing a friend or colleague. Others believe that a polite and discreet comment can actually help someone avoid greater embarrassment in the future. Attitudes toward grooming have also changed, especially for men. Before the 1960s, many men used little more than soap and water to wash. Today, it is common for young men to use shampoo, conditioner, and skincare products. Advertising and social media have helped make personal care more acceptable and even fashionable for men of all ages. When we imagine the past, we often think that people were extremely dirty or smelly. Medieval towns certainly lacked modern plumbing, but historical records suggest that people still valued cleanliness. Public bathhouses existed in many cities, and people washed their clothes and bodies whenever they could. Even today, visitors to developing countries often notice that people with very limited resources still manage to look clean and well presented. Despite modern hygiene, some problems have never disappeared. Children still sometimes get head lice at school, and in recent years there have been more reports of bed bugs in homes and hotels. These tiny insects remind us that complete cleanliness is impossible. Technology has also made clean homes easier to maintain. In the past, wealthy families often employed several servants to help with cleaning, washing, and cooking. Today, many people rely on appliances such as washing machines, vacuum cleaners, and dishwashers, which make household tasks far quicker and easier. However, some experts believe modern society worries too much about germs. While good hygiene is important for health, a completely sterile environment is neither possible nor necessary. A balanced approach to cleanliness may be the healthiest solution.
Halitosis, when even your dog won't kiss you. Visit your oral hygienist today.
And your typical mistake for this week is the word graffiti. Graffiti is one of those very strange words. It takes a singular verb, so graffiti is annoying. You can say some graffiti, and it never has an S on the end, even if you want it to be plural. If you saw some graffiti, that is neither singular nor plural. If you want it to be singular, you have to say a piece of graffiti. So it's one of those strange words. It's kind of uncountable, takes a singular verb, and it's kind of plural at the same time. It's an odd word. And don't forget, the walls are covered with graffiti. The walls are not full of graffiti because it's only a two-dimensional surface. So the walls are covered with graffiti, but never graffitis, okay? You quite often hear people use the word pretty to mean quite. They say, that's pretty good. But it also means that we have some strange oxymorons, because you can then use pretty with words like ugly. So if you want to say that building is quite ugly, you could say it's pretty ugly. Pretty ugly is a very strange thing to say. There are other things like awfully, terribly, and even frightfully, which mean very. So you hear people say, that's awfully good. Awfully good. How can something be awfully good? These last ones of awfully, terribly, and frightfully are quite posh, I think. If you hear somebody say, oh, that's frightfully good, it sounds very posh to me. Most of us just say, really. It's really good. And that's about all we have for you this week. Hope you enjoyed that. I hope it wasn't too disgusting for you. Don't forget, we have a gathering on Friday the 27th in the office to have some glasses of wine or a beer, a bit of cheese maybe. And the new book for the next trimester will be going to print soon, so don't forget to make your reservations now. I need to know how many people will be attending which groups, and then I can buy lots of books for you. And it's going to be a cracker. It's going to be a great book, even better than the last one, as usual. So if I don't see you at the meeting point, have a good week. Till next week.